Welcome back to the Northbridge Flute Academy. And now you may have noticed that today I actually have two flutes with me. Now, I'm not going to do anything particularly peculiar by showing you how to play two flutes at the same time, because not even I can manage that. But it is of interest today because we're looking at the Madrigal by Philippe Gaubert, the famous French flute player, composer and conductor. And the reason I've got this flute is because this flute on the left, this is my Northbridge flute here, which is a wonderful 700 series. And this flute that's looking a little bit more tired, it has to be said, is my Louis Lot flute, as a lot of English-speaking people refer to them. And the serial number on this is 1984, 1984, which I think is quite appropriate. And it was made in 1873. And the reason I've got this out today to show you is because the flute that Philippe Gaubert played on, its serial number was 1986, or two flutes further on from this flute. So historically, this is quite a special moment for me to be talking about Philippe Gaubert's Madrigal and to have a flute that's very close to the kind of flute that he would have played on. Now, as I said, Philippe Gaubert was a phenomenal part of the French school of flute playing. It was founded by Paul Edmund-Davies effectively in 1860, Paul Edmund-Davies and others, but most of the literature we now read about the French flute school highlights Paul Edmund-Davies as being one of the great implementers of this school of flute playing. And even though Philippe Gaubert comes later, we have all heard of the exercise books, the technique book by Edmund-Davies and Gaubert. So they were very closely in touch with one another, they worked with one another, and they followed one another as teachers at the Paris Conservatoire. So this was a phenomenal time for the flute. You know, Gaubert's dates are from 1879 to 1941, and this piece Madrigal was first published in 1908. Now, this was an amazing time for the flute in France, because with the arrival of the French flute school, the Bohème system flute, the flute was transformed, the world of the flute was transformed, and composers started to get interested in writing for it. And one of the key things that they were in love with, if you like, was the textures and quality of sound that could be produced with these flutes in the lower octaves. And this piece, Madrigal, shows a lot of that. It sort of operates mainly in the middle to bottom octaves. So there's an awful lot for us to focus on in this piece. As I say, the Madrigal was written in 1908, in the same year, in the Paris Conservatoire, where each year a new work was commissioned by a favoured composer. In 1908, it was a piece by Henri Busset, The Prelude and Scherzo. And this Madrigal is a sort of foil to that piece. From the point of view, it's a very, very gentle melody. It's a slow melody. It's a low melody. The two ingredients there lead us to think of a hazard warning triangle, because if it's low and it's slow, it's going to be potentially flat as well. So we have to work hard in this piece. Your breath is your voice. If you don't take a decent breath before this piece starts, or before you come, it's 3 bars of introduction, or nearly 4 bars of introduction. If you don't take a decent breath, you're going to sound flat, you're going to sound uninteresting. The breath is not simply there to be able to make you play long phrases, it's there to make sure that within that phrase, the air is providing quality of sound. So I would breathe probably for a whole bar before I actually sound the upbeat quaver or 8th note into bar 5. We've then got a very long phrase, so you're going to need a lot of air. So we're going to need something like this. Now, I'm using my air to help me get through that phrase. We've got a few problems though. In the second bar, The E, doesn't matter what your flute is, it doesn't matter whether it's made from gold, frankincense or myrrh. E's in the middle octave of the flute, or the second octave of it, they are always going to be flat. So we have to actually physically think them up and actually apply extra energy here to push the air through to make that note resonate. So there we got a long scale down. Now, if you start the scale quieter at the top, that gives you room to make a crescendo to the bottom, which will also assist in you not going flat. Moving on from there, we've got two phrases. That's fine, but then and I would suggest in bar 11, in the second half of the bar, you keep something in reserve to make a little bit of crescendo to the bottom, because the flute naturally gets weaker. It also gets flatter if we don't do that. So something along the lines of from bar 11. And that nicely sort of takes us round to the end of the phrase in bar 13. Flowing on from there, we've got similar material through to bar 21. Now, in bar 21, things change from the point of view we have un peu plus vite, a little bit quicker. But it's still got to have that kind of hazy, lazy aspect to it. It doesn't want to sound hurried. Throughout these bars, the next 3 or 4 bars, quite often it's a 8th note followed by a 16th note, or a quaver followed by 2 semiquavers. And it's always the second of the semiquavers or 16th notes that get hurried. So try to avoid try this. And are careful of the E at the end of the phrase. And we move on, and we move back into the sort of more dreamy material. And once again, in bar 31, we get quicker again. Bar 31 is back to the original melody, but now in a different key. Moving on through this, we then have in bar 38 arpeggios going up to a top F, and this is the first time we've gone that high in the instrument, so be careful. And interestingly, he makes the crescendo go to the 3rd beat of bar 39, so keep something in reserve. Moving on. Now we are high up, so don't push your sound through the flute. Let your sound just float over the top. This goes on through to bar 50, where we suddenly find we've got a little cadenza in a sense. We have so make sure in bar 51 and 52 everything connects. We've got a rowl in bar 52 and then a mordant on the fourth beat, the first note of the fourth beat. Don't hurry it. And then we're back to familiar territory with that slow, almost like pastoral theme. And then finally, towards the end, in bar 66, we go high up again, but this is piano with just a hint of a little bit more extra activity in terms of volume. But it needs to be very gentle because high up, everyone can hear us. You don't need to push the sound there. And then finally, we've got a very long phrase at the end, and it's up to you to decide where to breathe. I know where I'd like to breathe, but in terms of actually what's been written, it's not necessarily correct, but this is what I do. And of course, we want that last note to be beautifully in tune. And that's everything I have to say on Gaubert's Madrigal.